Welcome to the Bronx African American History Project. My name is Steven Payne, librarian and archivist at the Bronx County Historical Society, and I'm here again with Peter B., who grew up in the Coops, or United Workers Cooperative Colony, at 2700 Bronx Park East, and this is part 3 of an oral history. So, Peter, you want to go ahead and kick it off where we left off last time?
Yes, you were asking name. You wanted me to give names. Name some names, Peter.
Friends of the family.
Which is what I was taught to not do when certain people came to the door.
Absolutely.
But you're not those certain people, so I will be able to share this information with you. Larry Morton, he may have been adopted. I don't know. But Ruth Allen was white, and Artie was black. So Ruth and Artie were his parents and friends of my parents. You were asking for some other friends.
Yeah. And Larry was a musician, or was a musician. I don't know if he's still around, but he was a musician, right?
Absolutely. He was extremely talented, was a jazz musician, played sax. I use sex and sax in the same vein.
Yeah. They go together.
I'm telling you. Everybody in the neighborhood was in love with Larry Morton. And that's both guys and girls.
Yeah.
So you haven't had any information on Larry? Because a lot of us have been trying to come up with information on what happened to Larry Morton.
Yeah. I haven't come across anything on him yet. I haven't directed all of my energies to locating him yet. I've started off with people that were, easier to find, and then a little more difficult, and yeah, so he's on my list. So we'll see if I can locate him, and if I do, okay, I'll definitely see if
let him know that people are.
Yeah.
He was. They were of similar ilk. His parents.
Sure.
But they may have moved to Europe.
Oh.
They may have moved to Europe, and so, and certainly by now they might be deceased.
Yeah.
But if Larry followed the convention of jazz, then, and I think I've heard that he might have, there may have been some drug use, and therefore he may not have turned out, he may not still be alive, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if he would be alive, again, he was part of the group. Paul Juergens, Stephen Dickerson, Larry Morton, Ferdinand. They were part of a larger group of kids that we all felt comfortable around.
Yeah. And they were all just a little bit older than you. And
they were a little bit older than me, yes.
You were kind of like the kid brother of the group, is that?
I was the whipping child, yes.
They tease you and have fun with you.
Oh, they did. Yeah. I think Larry and Paul Juergens took me out on a boat in one of the camps, Unity probably.
Yeah.
On a lake, and started to rock the boat because they knew that would make Peter scared.
Yeah.
They were in control, and I was just, so it was that type of thing.
Yeah.
If I wanted to be accepted by them, I had to undergo certain rituals. And then I could be part of the group. If I were older, I'm glad that I didn't continue that trend of bullying. I'd call that.
You ended that. That's good.
And during our interview, I will try to come up with other names, because
Sure.
that's
Sure.
something that I didn't write down, but I had in my head. And Ruth and Artie were one group, one couple, but there should be others that would come up in our conversation.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let's continue, and then I might be able to come back to.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. As they occur, you can just
Yeah.
interject them and we can either come back to them, or if you want to treat them at that point, we can do so. So yeah, what remains is there's from what you've said, quite the story about how you uh, uh, ended up at Georgetown as the Vietnam War was going on, and
Yeah.
avoided risking your life for a pointless, terrible, and
Oh, it
expensive
was
war.
worse than pointless.
Yeah,
It was just,
criminal.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you don't learn from the Chinese, from the French, that little country is not going to be taken over by anybody.
Yeah.
The United States doesn't always work.
No,
Ah,
no, no.
especially when you have stealth.
Yeah.
But my story about getting into Georgetown was so magical that I don't believe in miracles. I mean, not that I don't believe in miracles, period. I don't believe in miracles in terms of God granting us miracles.
Yeah.
But I don't know what other word I would use for some of the stuff that has gone on in my life, other than, had it not been, well, I'll just tell the story and
Yeah.
then you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here I am in camp. Oleana, Camp Oleana.
Ah, okay, okay.
In 1965, yes, in 1965, and I was a counselor, had a girlfriend, because I wasn't out. And if anybody did have any questions about me, and they should have, now that I have done more thinking in terms of some of the stuff that I had done. I was, doing dance when boys were not doing dance,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But I think the girlfriends just might have confused people that thought, there's one. Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow, here I am in camp, and I thought I applied to medical school, but I only applied to one medical school, and I actually thought that I was going to get in. It was SUNY Downstate, the school
Okay.
that I eventually did get into.
Sure.
And I was rejected.
Mm.
We didn't have a lot of money then. And so one of the reasons I didn't apply to many places or think of going to many places is because I needed to go to a state school, or that would have, I needed to find a way to pay,
Yeah. Yeah.
even in terms of applying. So I really thought, as I said, that downstate was going to be where I was going to go. I was rejected. I had a letter in July. I had a letter that in August I was to go to Whitehall Street. That was where they were doing the physical exams for the draft. And I knew that I was not going to go to Vietnam. I felt like I was a CO. Had we talked about this at all?
No.
Okay. I felt like I was a conscientious objector, but you needed to have a religious basis in
Yeah.
order for them to feel like you're a CO, which to me is absurd.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
absurd to think that I would have to join the Quakers or be a Quaker or whatever other group had tenets that would allow them to be a CO. I just felt like, first of all, I felt like killing was wrong, and then I felt like the war was completely wrong. And yet, I was going to be drafted.
Yeah.
Or go to jail, or go to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's interesting is that I didn't even think of the option that would have gotten me out. And that option was, hey, I'm gay.
Yeah.
What that would have given me would have, and 4F would have been undesirable,
Yeah.
meaning that you were an undesirable, and therefore, at that time, they were using your draft status as a way of employment and a way of deciding things about you,
Yeah.
whether you were going to get into this school or, what was, were you 2A, were you 1A, were you 4F? Because that could be psychological.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, Stephen, is that it didn't even occur to me that I could say that. And then if I had to try to prove it, I don't know how I would have been able to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened, and this is the miracle part, is Stan Gold, G-O-L-D, was the doc in the camp.
Mm.
And so he was the camp doctor, and he knew me very well. We knew each other. We were good friends. And he said, my father lives in Lower New York, and the chairman of the Department of Pharmacology, Theodore Capagni, is going to be coming through tomorrow, or the next day, and is going to be staying at my father's house. He's coming from Europe, and he's going to be going back to Georgetown. So on his way back to Georgetown, again, he was the chairman of the Department of Pharmacology in the School of Medicine, and that was very important, the School of Medicine, because at that point, they were giving deferments only to people in School of Medicine or School of Dentistry.
Mm.
They stopped giving it for college students and for graduate students, other than medicine or dentistry. So it had to be something specific. It had to be School of Medicine, and that's why I thought I was screwed.
Yeah.
Because I was going to be going to medical school in my mind, and then I wasn't.
Yeah.
So on my day off, I went down. Stephen, I couldn't tell you what pharmacology was at that point from physiology.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it had to do with drugs. I didn't know if that meant you would become a pharmacist or a pharmacologist.
Yeah.
I certainly learned a lot before I went down there, so I didn't look like a fool. But the point was that I was interviewed by Dr. Capagni, and he accepted me into the Department of Pharmacology without seeing my grades, without me taking the GRE,
Wow.
without me doing anything other than being interviewed by him on that day. And he accepted me. And to me, I still can't comprehend how that would have happened in Georgetown.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about some third or fourth rate school. I don't know of any third or fourth rate school anyhow that would be School of Medicine.
Yeah.
They're all really going to be top rate. So that was my story. I got accepted to Georgetown in the Department of Pharmacology and got a master's degree in pharmacology. And to this day, I don't understand how that happened. I mean, truly, you, there are steps that you really need to take,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
showing a transcript or taking a test. Or, I mean, he would have asked me questions about pharmacology I wouldn't have been able to have answered.
Yeah.
So it wasn't my pharmacology knowledge that got him, you know, I have no idea. All I know is that a day before I had the interview, I was trying to think if I was going to go to jail or Canada. And the
Yeah.
day after the interview or the day of the interview, I was accepted to Georgetown,
Wow. Wow.
which, again, it had to be in the School of Medicine.
Yeah.
And Department of Pharmacology was in the School of Medicine.
Yeah. 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 Did,
So, Stephen, what word would you use for something that other than I was touched by a miracle? I
yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that God touched me, but I'm saying that you. How would you describe something like that? I mean,
Definitely miraculous and, some sort of unexplainable way. I mean, yeah, 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 yeah. Did you interact with you said Dr. Campagny is his name?
Compagnie.
Campagny. Did you interact with him any more after that, or he was just kind of
Oh
the first?
no, he was the chairman of the department.
Yeah,
So once
yeah,
I got down there, I was under his aegis, and so
yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
I'm sure he never brought it up or anything as
In
far
terms
as
of why he accepted
yeah, yeah,
me,
yeah.
no, not that I remember.
Yeah.
No,
Wow. I mean, clearly he saw something there. What, I'm sure it was a combination between you and circumstances and everything where, wow, I mean, I don't know. That's such a remarkable story.
well, it changed my life.
Yeah,
It changed
definitely.
my life completely. From
Yeah. I mean, in a very real sense, it literally might have saved your life, if you'd had to have gone over to Vietnam. The casualties were tremendous. If you'd gone to jail, that's not
the
necessarily.
casualties could have been tremendous,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and if I'd gone to Canada, the casualties could have been tremendous
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms
yeah,
of what I might have lost from picking up. I mean, what we're talking about, Stephen, is a month,
yeah,
or some maybe two. I don't would have been had a I would have had a physical exam in August. I don't know what they would have done. Whether after that you go on the bus or you run away. But in any case, that didn't happen, and so that there were, I'd say, three or four things in my life like that that completely changed my life, completely altered the path of
yeah,
my life,
yeah,
and that was one of them. Um, that led me to Georgetown. That led me to a picket line. That led me to looking because I knew enough about placards, and the FBI was taking pictures, and there was a girl in back of me with green eyes. Did I tell you that green-eyed girl was my wife? Ended up being my wife.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, and so I turned around and said to her, "Put your placard up when we go around this area." And she had the most gorgeous green eyes, and only to find out that she took them out at night because they were hard contacts. But she got me anyhow.
Yeah,
She got
yeah,
me at
yeah,
the green eyes,
yeah.
and so that was one story. I'm wondering, Stephen, should we talk about some of the paths like that that made me go in a completely different direction now? Because another path might be, X years later.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that makes sense to talk about these, for lack of a better
Unusual
term,
events.
yeah, miraculous junctures in your
Yeah.
life or unusual events. Yeah. I think that
Okay.
makes a lot of sense.
Well, well, I should just say about going to Georgetown, I was thinking that I was wasting 2 years of my life because I didn't want to be a pharmacologist.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a doctor. And Steve, and again, there was this rivalry with Stephen Yebeck, if you remember.
Yeah.
You know, he and I were both in the SPs. And so when I didn't go to medical school, he did. He went to downstate. So eventually I went to downstate 2 years later, and I'm watching, you know, Stephen now is 2 years ahead of me and is letting me know that he's 2 years ahead of me.
Sure.
So I was resentful in a way, but really, you know, just for a minute, it really saved my life. But what it really did was it changed my life, because I came into medical school having a master's degree in pharmacology.
Yeah.
Therefore, I was able to be a teacher's aide and help out students in pharmacology. And when I went to Denver in the 4th year of medical school, we're allowed to go outside of whatever school we're going to and do what's called an externship.
Sure.
An internship is after the 4th year, after you graduate. We don't talk about interns anymore. We talk about residencies. But then it was, you could have taken a year of internship and just been a GP. Or you could have gone through a full residency program. And so I ended up here, and Barry Rumack was the director of the Rocky Mountain Poison Center. And poison centers were just starting at that time. Before that time, when I say they was just starting, as a specialty.
Sure.
Toxicology was not a specialty yet. And we needed to have that, because poison centers might have been, it's a bad term to use because it's not racist, it's sexist, manned by a pediatrician or by a psychiatrist. You never knew who you might be talking to, but you would not necessarily be talking to a trained toxicologist. And so Barry was trained in Edinburgh to be a toxicologist. I was a pharmacologist with a master's. Barry asked, I was working, this was after medical school. So I went and became a resident, essentially, in internal medicine at the University of Colorado. Barry asked, would I be interested in becoming the associate director of the Rocky Mountain Poison Center with my background?
Yeah.
And of course I said yes. And so I was, when I graduated from the residency program, I was working in the emergency department, but I was also associate director of the Rocky Mountain Poison Center.
Yeah.
And that got me to speak locally about toxicology. Barry was the big star because he was the head. And so when you had to go to North Dakota or South Dakota or some of those places, Bismarck, to speak, I was the one.
Yeah.
So one day, Barry was sick, and he said, Peter, you need to do me a favor. What? You need to go to San Diego in 2 days, and you need to speak on toxicology for 4 hours to 100 and something people. And I said, okay, but it's a guy's name, Josh, what's the singer who, Josh Groban.
Josh Groban. Yeah, yeah.
If you know his history was that he was a student, and Bocelli was sick, and he was supposed to sing with Celine Dion, My
Hmm.
Prayer.
Yeah.
And so they asked Josh Groban to do it. And that was the way that he started.
Yeah.
So
This was your Josh Groban moment.
became a Josh Groban moment when Barry said, "Would you go to San Diego?" I had no choice. And the thing, I must have done something to bowl them over,
Yeah.
because fr- from then on, this was every 3 months conference that they would have. They asked me to do that rather than Barry.
Wow.
And, I was almost like, Barry, what should I do? Well, they want you, go for it. But you let me. So anyhow, that led me on a road of the lecturing circuit that I went to a course. This sounds so disconnected, Stephen, but in my mind, it's all connected. I'm
Sure.
hoping that it's not disconnected for you.
Oh no, it makes complete sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I went to a 3-day cardiology course um, led by one of the leading cardiologists. And, if you're in a cardiology course for 3 days, any course for 3 days, you kind of zone out. And I remember kind of zoning out and being in some sort of a place where I was dreaming. And the thought came to me, Peter, are you ready at this stage of your life to do a 3 or 4 day course like Henry Marriott was
Yeah.
just doing? Um, and then I woke up and I started thinking about that. And I thought I could put together a road show and see if people would be interested.
Yeah.
And so I went to Barry and I told Barry, Barry, here's my idea. I'm wondering what you think, because I wouldn't want to do something if he didn't think if he thought I was stepping on his toes. And so I told him, and he thought it was a great idea. Um, and now I'm working in 2 different departments, in the poison center and in the emergency department.
Yeah.
Well, Barry was lying. It wasn't something that he wanted. He
Mhm.
just never, eventually I found out about it because I was told that I was obstructing the interaction between the ER and the poison center,
Mm.
and which made no sense to me.
Yeah.
And so finally, when I talked to Barry, eventually, he said, Peter, uh, I had to do this, and you stole, what you have right now. If you're going to be doing this, first of all, Peter, the reason I said yes is because I never thought you would do it.
Yeah.
That is something that is so overwhelming to try to do that I never thought you would do it. And so he even actually had me cancel some of these 4-day courses. Um, and I believed him. He was telling me that you can't go down to Arizona because Arizona is thinking that's their territory. And I
Mm.
thought, what kind of politics is this? Of course I
Yeah.
can go. But Barry was saying no, so I didn't. So eventually, I left the emergency department and went over to St. Anthony Hospital, which is a private hospital, very busy, equal to Denver General. But the point of leaving Denver General to go to St. Anthony meant that I had more time.
Yeah.
I was not doing these, what are called CRIT courses, Comprehensive Review in Toxicology.
Mm.
But the reason I'm mentioning that is that that became my livelihood from whenever I left Denver General to a particular specific day that we can talk about it was the bombing of the World Trade Center.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah.
for that long, from 1980 until 2011, I was doing these courses 12 times a year, 18 times a year, 4-day courses. And that meant that I didn't have to work in the ER as much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what that meant was that I was able to write a textbook, and I was able to write a second edition. And I was able to write a third edition. And my third edition was about 1,000 pages.
Wow.
And so I became the go-to person in the nation for toxicology.
Yeah.
And toxicology was burgeoning at that time because, again, we were the first group, and we would then be training other people.
Yeah.
And my courses were to other physicians, ER docs, to try to get them, get them. I know that might sound strange since they were docs, but when somebody comes in coma and they can't talk to you, you've got to quickly go through what we call differential diagnosis to come up with what things you could rule out, what you need to rule out, what you can't rule out, what you need to get further testing on. And so I would present these 4-day courses in toxicology, which could be considered a very boring subject. And yet it became something that was so enjoyable for everybody.
Yeah.
That I was invited to so many places that some of them I couldn't do.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard had me every year because they wanted their interns, residents, essentially, to know about toxicology, especially when we're talking about nerve gases or other things. But they were emergency physicians, so
Yeah.
okay. So again, Barry's getting sick led to me becoming the. Hold on, Steven.
Oh, sure.
So.
Oh, wow.
This was the latest book that I've written. And, it's unusual to have it written by one person.
Yeah, usually you see at least 3 or 4 names on the cover, and then you
course.
open it and there might be more names even.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that was going for me. I eventually really was burning out of the ER. Yeah. Plus the fact, Stephen, that once I was positive, I didn't want to continue.
Yeah.
They didn't want me to continue. I talked to my boss, and he told me how I would have to act, which is that I would have to tell people that I was HIV positive. Would they want me to treat them? Of course, at that point in time, the answer would be no. Right? I mean, if they had a choice, no, I don't want you to touch me. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about the disease.
Yeah, yeah.
All I know is that if you got something, I don't want you near me. There are people that still feel that way.
Yeah.
Today. So that was one thing that led me to become somebody completely different than who I was expecting to be. I thought I was just going to be an emergentologist and a toxicologist, but not necessarily. This was Canada, US, Puerto Rico, and even Brazil.
Wow. Yeah, it's wild. I feel like you go to an ER now and people just take for granted. I mean, a toxicology report just seems like such a common thing, but yeah, you literally wrote the textbook on it.
How about that? Yes, really, exactly. A few of them. And I was having the time of my life writing it because it allowed me I had a second home in Rio,
Yeah.
and a second home in Puerto Rico. Um, and it allowed me to go down to Rio with chapters that I would be editing. So I'd be working.
Yeah.
And, I could be working in a cafe, outdoor cafe, and look up and just see the pretty people and then go back down to editing. It was perfect. Eventually, I would be taking my kids also. I would take one of them, and they started out as cute uh, additions um, that would help register people. And so then, they were 10 years old or something like that, and they were cute. But I was able to have a one-on-one with my kids, and they were able to see me working, and then we were able to go out and have a good time.
Yeah.
So my parents lived in Puerto Rico, and I was able to set up these courses where I wanted to.
Yeah.
I would think, oh, where would people want to go? And then I would say, I'm going to be in Puerto Rico here on this date. Anybody want to go? Go. And it would fill.
Yeah.
So my parents were there for the winters. And so we would go to Puerto Rico, and I would take one or both of my kids there. And then I would have the same course in New York in May, when the weather was nice or nicer. And so it was an amazing, wonderful experience that had I not had that, and I would have had to have said that I'm HIV positive and therefore cannot continue to work, I think I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because of toxicology, so, it leads back to Kopanye and Georgetown and meeting Jackie and having kids and, my life changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where if you change just one circumstance and all of the different circumstances that have come together in your life, there's a chance that things might have ended up more or less in the same place that you are now. But I mean, probably more likely than not,
They would not have.
it would not
They,
have.
they wouldn't have, Stephen. They couldn't
Yeah.
have. They couldn't have. I mean, even with going to Georgetown, if I couldn't do that, the other choices we talked about.
Yeah.
Two other instances that changed my life. One was something that we may have talked about. I was speaking in Tacoma at whatever Army base there was in Tacoma. I would do that every summer. And I went up to Seattle to see a movie with a friend of
Yeah.
mine, and it was Jesus of Montreal.
Yes, yes, yes.
And on the way back to the Sheraton, I dropped him off, and I said, Chris, I really missed a lot of what was going on because I'm not familiar with the last days of Christ. And he said, well, and I said this to you a few weeks ago, you got a book in your hotel that you can pick up and read. And that movie and that talk that I had with Chris and that opening the Bible changed the direction, of course, of my life again.
Yeah.
Because I started to read, and wait a minute, there were two stories. I thought I just read that, but it looks different. So was he on the water for 40 days and 40 nights? Because that's what it says here, but it looks like 150 days, 150. So what's going on? And so I decided that was so fascinating to me that's when I went to ILIF. That's when I took as many courses in religion as I could at the various colleges around. I had a tutor 2 or 3 days a week and we would go through the Bible. And so she would talk about some of the things that I needed to understand, as talking to you about the remnant of goddess religions, etc. But just all of those things that were more historically based
Sure.
than, and also in terms of, there were two kingdoms, and that's why that there were two stories, and they had to combine them. And the scribes didn't know, should they use the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom to combine. So they combined them and used both.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why you'll see two stories. Genesis, and you got one Genesis, and then 2:5, you got another Genesis coming.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Completely
Because one was written by the J writer and one was written by the E writer.
Yeah.
And you could actually separate them based on the names that they would use, the way that they would speak, the fact that one would call it Yahweh and the other would be Elohim, which is plural, but that works. So that led me to teaching for 5 years or so at Metro State College, under the aegis of an English professor, and so we co-taught that class. Another thing that happened was, do you have any question about this?
This is great so far. I'll see.
Are we going too far outside of?
No. This is it all makes sense because these are all pivotal moments in your life. So once we get to the end of that, if there's anything that I feel needs to be explored further, we can do that. But keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing that happened that should not have happened, Steven, was that I was in coma in 96. And I got out of the hospital in September. And I started the first place that I went out of the house was a movie theater in the daytime when there wasn't anybody there, because it was February. It was cold.
Yeah.
I was skinny from losing weight, and I hadn't gained it back up again. And I wanted to see this movie that I had seen many times before, and it was called Secrets and Lies. Secrets and Lies was about a white Brenda Bethlehem. It was a British movie, and she was a white mother who had a black child, but she didn't know. She never saw her child. The child was taken away. So while I was watching that movie, I was thinking, I really love watching movies over and over because I like to see what happens, how they get from this part to this part. Well, I didn't realize that's called editing. And so what I said to myself in that movie theater that day was, I want to be a director. And then I said, Peter, you can't just be a director. You have to go to film school. And then you have to, go up the ladder. So my question was, are there any film schools around? And I found that there was a film school about 10 minutes away from me, 15 minutes away from me, at Red Rocks Community College. And so I called them up that next day, and the semester had already started in January, and so I would have been late, but the director said he would allow me to come in.
Yeah.
Maybe because they wanted the money.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I started film school, and I was taking various courses, and I remember the editing class that I was taking, the guy was really awful.
Mm.
And I felt like, I'm not a stupid person, but I'm not getting this. I mean, I wonder if other people are, he's just not communicating. He's not doing well. And I remember I was going to go home, but instead of going home, I went to school. And that was the difference. Going to school that day allowed me to talk to the head of the department, because he's not free to talk to, he's so busy.
Yeah.
But Frederick was around. And so he said, how are things going? And I, you know, I'm older than a lot of the other people that were film students. I think he respected me for various reasons. And I just told him, Frederick, I really tell you, I don't think that the guys teaching editing is doing a good job. You know what he said to me?
What do you say?
He said, do you think you could do a better job? And I said, I do.
Yeah.
I think that if in next semester I could do a better job. He said, let's try it. So all of a sudden, I am a student, and then the next semester, I'm a teacher.
Wow.
And that I taught at Red Rocks for 20 years.
Yeah. Wow.
The first course was the editing course. But then I got it in my head that, well, maybe I could do a course in music. And, we have the various software programs that we could be using for music. And so, it went along with the editing, right? You want to have music for your video. So you want to edit your music and you edit your video. And so I was the teacher of video editing, of audio editing. And then I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I became a travel photographer. And you may or may not have looked at my website.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful pictures.
And then I started to teach photography.
Yeah.
So I was teaching at Red Rocks. I would not say full-time, but they were 4-hour classes. So 3 or 4 days a week for 4 hours was not, they didn't want you to be full-time, because then you would have privileges.
Yeah.
They wanted to be able to hire and fire.
Yeah.
And if they didn't like you for a reason, you're out. I need to check my sugar.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. But I was able to thrive in that environment. The students, I loved what I was doing. The students loved me. And I hope you don't take that the wrong way.
Oh, no, not at all. When I was teaching for my PhD program, I can say the same thing confidently about my classes as well. There's a certain dynamic that you can establish in a class where it's clear that you love your students and your students love you back. There were a couple classes where that wasn't as clear when I was teaching, but the vast majority of them that I taught, I was able to establish that also. So I know what you mean.
It was the kind of thing where one student would have come and said, you always hope that there's somebody that you could say made a real difference in their life, in one's life. And I have to tell you that you are the person that made the difference in my life. And it came from this woman who, that's, what more would a teacher want to hear?
Yeah.
But something like that.
Yeah.
Or I would be hearing things like, what other classes are you teaching? because I will take any class that you are teaching.
Yeah.
It's not even something that I thought I would want to take, but if you're teaching it, I love the way you teach.
Yeah.
And the way that I would teach would be very different than anybody else. I called it a quasi-Socratic method. I would be asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'd act like I didn't know the answer. So I don't understand. So how many, what's the range of human hearing? John, do you happen to know that? Well, that's okay if you don't. Sarah, do you happen to know the range of human hearing? Well, it's 20 to 20. Okay, that's good. We're on something. 20 to 20 what? And so I would pick on people, and the very first time I would pick on them, I would let them know that, listen, I know how you feel right now.
Yeah.
I know that if I asked you your name, you would probably say, just wait a minute, let me take my wallet, because, you know, I'm scaring you. You're deer in the headlights in the road. But I'm doing it for you. You don't necessarily see that now, but that you will find it a different way of experiencing learning.
Yeah.
And so that's what we would do. And they would be interjecting and asking me a question, and everybody would ask, I have a quick question. And I would stop them and say, you know what? Everybody has a quick question. I have never heard, I have a long question. It's always a quick question. It's the answer that may be long to start with. So let me hear your quick question. I may or may not answer it right now. It may be part of what we're going to be talking about another time, but sure, go ahead. Let me hear. So we just ended up having a lot of fun, and my teachers were then evaluated. 40 years ago, that didn't happen, but
Yeah.
my valuations were always right up there in the 10s. So they would continue to want me to teach.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do. I would teach at night, and I would come home at about 10 and then have dinner, which is why my sleeping schedule is so weird. Because between the ER and then the teaching, I would go to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, and that just continued.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like one of the guiding threads throughout at least, I think, 3 out of the 4 pivotal moments. One, the first one just seems, miraculous in a way through and through. But with the other moments, it seems like one of the guiding threads is just your insatiable curiosity, which kind of, opened you to these possibilities to begin with. And is that something that you think is just kind of a integral part of who you are, or
Absolutely.
were your parents supportive of that aspect of you in any way, or were
My
they themselves
parents
that
were
way?
not supportive of anything in particular.
Yeah.
My mom was Jewish. If we want to use a stereotype, it's, I want you to be a doctor. Not coming from my parents.
Yeah.
I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
I want you to be happy. And so that's one of the reasons as to why I kind of failed in getting into day school the first time, because I had issues that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I needed to work through those issues and try to see if I could be, quote, normal. And when I realized that normal doesn't necessarily lead to where I wanted to be, it didn't lead to college.
Yeah.
Day school led to night school. And so my parents were always supportive of me.
Yeah.
And, but if I were to think of how I look at myself, I don't think of, yes, I am a doc. Yes, I've taught this. Yes, I've taught. I think of myself, and I think I said this earlier, I think of myself as an educator.
Yeah.
What I like to do is to take in a subject as much as I can, and I become enveloped in it. And I love that learning aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then I like to figure out a way to turn it around so that I could help others learn it in a way that would help others learn it.
Sure.
And so I actually wrote textbooks for my classes on video editing with Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro, and then with Logic for the audio program. And so, I felt like, my God, I used one side of my brain for medicine. Now I'm using the other side of my brain for the arts.
Yeah.
It's full brain here.
Yeah.
But don't sneeze, because if you sneeze, you may lose it all.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I feel like with all of the wasted human potential, especially in this country, but there's plenty of other countries where that happens too. I'm sure that that given the right circumstances, that many people would ideally be able to explore all of these varied interests, and become enthralled in them, just as you have. And it's really something to hear about, to hear the instances where that's actually happened for someone who wasn't just born into wealth. But usually some of those people aren't the ones who actually actualize all of these potentials.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you came from parents where your father was a union furniture maker and your mother worked for the same union, and here's what you've made of your life. That's just a wonderful, marvelous thing.
And the first generation,
First
again,
generation. Yeah.
that hit me later on, because my mother didn't tell me until later on that not only am I living where I'm living, but my mother was an immigrant.
Yeah.
And I'm the product of an immigrant and a black man, a
Yeah.
Jewish woman and a black man. And here I am, living the life. I couldn't be, you don't know where I live. Well, you said you've been to Denver, but I mean, I've lived here for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to live, 45 years in the same place,
Yeah.
house.
Wow.
Because it is spectacular to be able to walk. The road that I walk on is a road that cars drive on.
Yeah.
So and it used to be a dirt road up until when they paved it, which wasn't that long ago. So, I feel like I feel like somehow I have had a life that I could never replicate. If I crossed the street that way, if I didn't go to speak to Frederick that day, he and I would not have had this discussion on editing, and I would have not been teaching for 20 years. If I hadn't gone to camp and talked to Stan Gold, if I hadn't gone to the movies and watched Secrets and Lies, then that led me to the film school. It's all these if.
Yeah.
And Sliding Doors, is that one of the movies that deals with, if you walk across the street in that direction? There was a movie where you saw the different ways that her life changed. If she crossed the street that way, she might have met whomever in her life would go in that direction. Or if she crossed the street, they backed up. Now she's crossing the street in this direction.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so very different.
yeah.
So,
Wow.
those are some of the things that I can't explain, but help me. You can explain it. Explain it to me.
I wish I could. I mean, I think each of them are a combination of chance events that are unexplainable and some of your own predispositions. I mean, like I said already, your insatiable curiosity definitely has opened or allowed you to see these opportunities where, if someone were stuck on thinking that their life only had to go a certain way, that they only had to be interested in one thing or two things, then that person wouldn't have even gone down some of these paths. But since you seems like from a very early age were open to exploring different paths, it allowed you to see the miraculous and to actually take advantage of it.
I was forced into pharmacology.
With that, for sure.
Right.
With that, for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I imagine it wasn't too long before you started gaining a genuine interest in toxicology.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that goes for languages as well.
Yeah.
I have I already talked about traveling and not wanting to be an American.
Yeah.
And the color of my, I can, if I'm in South America, I can get away with them thinking that I'm somewhere from that area. Or if I'm in the Middle East, then I remember them thinking I was a Lebanese terrorist or something like that.
Yeah.
But
And Italy,
once I'm speaking, then I can be outside of being an American. And so what I would try to do is learn the language well enough so that I would not have to use any English at all. I could make a fool of myself. I don't mind making a fool of myself. I call it making a fool of myself.
Yeah.
But others don't see it that way. They see it as he's an American and he's wanting to learn our language. Yeah, let's help him. And there were times when I would say things that made everybody laugh.
Yeah, sure.
There's a mountain in Rio, Sugarloaf. Well, Sugarloaf is pão de açúcar. Açúcar is sugar. Pão is bread. But depending on how you say the word pão, you can I'm trying to nasalize it right now. But if you don't, then it ends up being wood and instead of bread. And that was their term for a hard-on, an erection. And so I would say, do you want to go to Pau tomorrow? Or, something like that. And again, they would have to, Peter, say it, Pau, Pau. And I would say, Pau, no, Pau. And I'd say, Pau, no. And, it was so close, but so far.
Yeah.
From there, hearing the right word is amazing.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Yeah. And I love your story about when you were in, I think, Italy and American tourists came up and
Brazil.
Oh, that was in Brazil.
Yeah, that was in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
That was in Rio. A group of Americans, kids, came up and they were looking for a bar. And I speak a little English. You want to go to bar? Yeah. I tell you what you like. And so I would be listening, and then, as I told you, the next day or the day after, when I saw that person again, I said, "So, my English good, you think?" "Oh, yeah, your English is very good." Because, the reason, and I started to make it more and more American, the reason that my English is good is because I am an American like you. Now, what I'm interested in is and he went, "Oh, mm, I thought you were Brazilian." "I know you did, and I heard you lie." Oh, to your friends, that you told them where you wanted to go, not what I
Yeah,
said.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
He said, "I
um,
promise I'll never do that again." I don't
oh
care.
my God. And speaking of Rio, do you want to share anything about your life in Rio? Because I know you had a home down there and you spent a lot of time down there.
I had a time sharing down there for a
Oh,
month.
okay. Yeah,
But I was involved with somebody, uh, which is breaking my heart right now.
yeah,
But I was involved with somebody, and so I would be going to Rio because I could,
sure.
because I was at that point doing toxicology for 4 days, working in the ER less and less and less, or not at all,
Yeah,
depending on the year. And when I was nurses, I was able, and then writing the book, I was able to go, and so there were times when I'd go to Rio 6 times a year.
wow.
uh, and use my time sharing, or just not, and
Yeah,
stay in the Sheraton or whatever other hotel. Um, but I became friends with a lot of people then who lived in the favelas. Uh, I mean, I was able to experience Rio. I mean, I look back now and I think how fucking excuse me,
no, 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 that's fine.
dangerous that was,
Yeah,
that I was actually, doing that kind of stuff, but I was young and foolish. Um, I drive one of my friends home and drive up the favela, and then driving back, the cops wouldn't go to the favelas.
yeah,
They had their own way of dealing with things, but they might be at the entrance or exit of one of the favelas, and they stopped me, uh, and I could speak uh, Brazilian Portuguese,
yeah,
but they also knew that maybe why would this guy be going up to the favelas, and they were thinking drugs,
yeah,
and I was thinking, I know that I'm not concerned about you looking in the car for drugs,
yeah,
but I don't know who rented this car before me.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I don't want you to tear this car apart and find something that, or plant something,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
because that could have been done as well. That never happened.
That's
I
good.
was lucky. Um, Ronaldo was his name. Um, and one of the things that I was trying to do was, in the beginning, was to teach him English.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we met. I thought that was my pickup line. Well, it wasn't really, but eventually, it was. I wanted people. I realized that if you could speak English, you could go from here to here.
Yeah,
You could have jobs that you would not ever be able to get if you couldn't speak any English.
yeah,
And so I was naive, and I thought that maybe I would be able to. So I made tapes for people, and I would go down there and we'd go over things, but you can't really teach unless somebody really has the time and the energy and the persistence
yeah,
and then they would have to interact with somebody.
yeah, definitely.
What you're talking about really relates to the gay side that we haven't really yet talked about.
Yeah,
Ronaldo was the the person that I would be going down to see. And we traveled around, and we traveled to Argentina, and we traveled around Brazil as well. And the last time I went down there was a few years ago.
Mm.
And I was getting scared.
Yeah.
I had to leave early. I felt like, I don't know, I had a premonition. I just felt like something awful was going to happen. And
Has, unfortunately.
I changed my reservation and came back early. I was going to downtown every day,
Yeah.
to a school. And had I not changed what I was doing, I would have been going downtown that day when there were 100,000 people in the street protesting the fact that they were raising the rates for the buses by 5 cents. And, you know, people couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
even, 5 cents. I'm making up a number, but it sounded small, but it wasn't small to a lot of people.
Sure.
And then riots broke out because there were so many people down there. And I could have been down there for another reason, but instead I had this premonition and I went home. But the problem with Ronaldo is that I cannot find a way to contact him.
Oh no.
That's not a working number, and I can't figure out any way. And hearing the deaths and hearing how the fact that they're not vaccinated really, and the the president is like Trump,
Yeah.
downplaying everything.
Yeah.
But Brazil is, surpassed us
Yeah.
in terms of all of the mortality. I don't know in terms of numbers, but certainly in terms of rates. So that's something that every day, it's in the news. And so every time I see Brazil, I'm thinking of Ronaldo. I'm thinking of a way. God, I wish there was a way that I could try to see if I could even know if he's alive. He couldn't be alive because he couldn't. I mean, he could, but he also couldn't.
Yeah.
So, I could talk more about that, or we could back up and talk about the gay part.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Coming out.
Yeah, you coming out.
Okay. So another chapter then?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just put my head together, thoughts together here. So I had a girlfriend a lot of girlfriends, but one of my girlfriends, Eileen, wanted to get married. And she was my first girlfriend. She wasn't necessarily my first, but we call her my first girlfriend. She lived in the projects.
Park
north of the Coops. One block north of the Coops. And she was in love with me. And I just realized that having had another girlfriend, I call her my first, but having had the camp girlfriend of Anne. And did I tell you the story of the fact that Jay was somebody I was in love with?
Yeah.
And I was going to school with, and he became a counselor. Yeah. And so Jay and I and Anne and whoever Jay's girlfriend was, we would take a day off together. And Anne said to me, I kind of feel like we're an appendage.
Yeah.
And that really got to me because it was true.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I could not give to Eileen what she might need. And so I sang her that song that I think I mentioned to you, the Tom Paxton song, "You're Going Away with No Word of Farewell. Will it be not a left behind. I could have loved you better, never meant to be unkind. That was the last thing on my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I went away, went to Georgetown.
Sure.
And from then on, so meeting Jackie, at that point, I was realizing that I was going to keep this as a secret.
Mm.
It was the 60s.
Yeah.
Great Britain still had laws up until 66, I believe, that would jail you, just as Oscar Wilde, Oscar Wilde, I guess.
Yeah. Oscar Wilde. Yeah.
Yeah, and others.
Plenty. Yeah. I'm sure plenty of others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forget Great Britain. U.S. had
U.S.
the same laws. I mean, I remember well after I came out, there was a case that went to the Supreme Court from Georgia, I think, because somebody peeked into somebody's room and saw these two men. And it was illegal to be doing that in Georgia, whatever that was. And yet it went to the Supreme Court, and that's when we started to open up a little bit in terms of equality, is when that case was, it didn't involve whatever it meant, but it involved enough so that we could congregate.
Yeah.
Because, in X number of states, I don't want to mention the number of states because I'd be wrong,
Yeah.
but in a number of states, it would have been illegal.
Sure. Sure.
And, we think about that now and go, really? It doesn't make, really? But yes, so why Jackie? I don't know. There was just something about Jackie was just the right person for me. And I knew that I wanted kids. I wanted to be, I remember, if you remember how I felt about my dad and the fact that he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Quote unquote. And I look at that very differently now than I did, but
Sure.
I remember just to myself promising I want to be the best father I could be.
Yeah.
Not realizing that I wouldn't be able to be a father because I was gay.
Yeah.
But then again, was I gay? I mean, it's what I would, eventually I might say that word, but I don't really know.
Yeah.
So Jackie and I got married. And then I realized that I could be doing the same thing to Jackie as I could have been to Anne. And what I said to myself was, Peter, you think of yourself as an honest person, but the person that you're being dishonest with the most is yourself.
Yeah.
You're not owning up to something that you are hiding. And the next thing I remember thinking is, I don't want to be old. And I defined old as 50.
Yeah.
I don't want to be old and looking back at my life and regretting the fact that I didn't find out more about me.
Sure.
And so I was so paranoid. We were living in New York. I was going to downstate, a medical school. And in the fourth year of externship, went to Colorado, did an externship in Colorado, which is why we ended up in Colorado, is because they had a chance to see me work. I was lucky to have that experience. And thinking that we were going to be moving to California.
Yeah.
I did an externship in California, in San Francisco, a few of them. I talked to you about the Student Health Project. We were out there for that as well, but this was very different. And I was so paranoid about meeting somebody in New York. Where would I go anyhow? I'm not a bar person.
Yeah.
And so a bathhouse is an anonymous place. I could find out something, but I couldn't go there
Yeah.
because I might run into somebody, the paranoid. So I went to San Francisco, Jackie and I felt the same. I couldn't come out
Yeah.
there. San Francisco, you can't come out? What are you talking about? I might meet somebody. So I had an interview for something down in Los Angeles. And that's where I said, I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
And it was, I went down, I met somebody, I had an experience, and I realized, oh my God, so this is the difference.
Yeah.
And the difference, I could perform.
Sure.
And so maybe I'm bisexual, but I consider it's kind of like I could be called white, I could be called black, but I call myself black.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I could be straight, I could be gay, I could be bisexual, I could be anything right now.
Yeah.
But I call myself gay,
Sure.
even though I have had girlfriends. Even when I was in a gay environment, there was a year in which I was with a woman.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I realized what I realized was that I now have to come out and tell Jackie.
Yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things for me to do. So I came back and I said, Jackie, there's something that we need to talk about. I take a deep breath and I'll just, wait a minute. I need to just figure out how I'm going to say this. This is it's not easy for me to say. Peter, say it already. I mean, I don't know what you could be saying, but it couldn't be as bad as what I'm thinking right now. I mean, did you murder somebody or what is going on? And Jackie, I'll tell you in a minute. It's just that, so forever. Eventually, Jackie, I'm gay. And she went something like, and that's what it was? Or somehow she underreacted in a way that made me go, what? Don't you treat that like this? This has been my fucking secret. I was gonna die with this.
Yeah.
And the fact that wow.
Yeah.
So, she wasn't completely, I mean, her husband now just came out to her as gay.
Yeah.
But we still had a relationship. And it was for years. We went back to Denver, and then at that point, Jackie said, well, I should say that I thought that I would have been the only gay doctor.
Yeah.
I never heard of a gay doctor. I mean, at that point, I'd never heard of even gay.
Yeah.
It was just kind of coming into a reality. I don't remember when Stonewall was, but for me, I was late.
Yeah.
But what I did was, when we went back to New York, I went to a psychologist, C.A. Tripp, Tripp, who was a gay psychologist working with gays to try to get them to accept or understand who they were, or whatever. I didn't really know.
Yeah.
I just knew that I wanted to talk to somebody, and that would help us, Jackie and I. And actually what Tripp said was he wanted me to explore it.
Yeah.
he did not want me to put it away. He wanted me to take it out and explore it. And I talked to Jackie about this. And so I went to Puerto Rico, and because that was, again, another home, quote
Sure.
unquote, I had a condominium there for my parents. And met somebody, again, really understood that I was gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what Jackie, her realization was, you know, I've given you the opportunity to understand who you are.
Yeah.
You need to do the same for me.
Sure.
And as it turned out, Jackie was a feminist. I felt like I was a feminist in absentia or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But Jackie then became a lesbian, not because of me,
Sure.
but because of who she was trying to find out who she was.
Yeah.
And so she lived, it was very interesting. You know, our children had a gay dad and a lesbian mom,
Yeah.
and they knew that.
Yeah.
So I never hid anything from my kids. At the same time, I didn't want to overwhelm them
Sure. Sure.
or scare them. I tried to talk to them at whatever level, you know, they might have been, 4 and 2 or 6 and 4. And I remember talking to Chris, my son, when we went to San Diego. I just wanted him to realize, because he looked up to me, and I wanted him to realize that, Chris, um, and I was trying to find the words to say this to him, but it would have been something like, just because I'm gay, that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And, you know, you need to understand your path and where you might be going. But I couldn't say it that way. I was trying to figure out a way to say it. And he came, I don't know how old he was, but he wasn't that old, but he was into it. Uh, into it.
Yeah.
Uh, and he said, "What you're trying to say is just be yourself, Dad?" I said, "Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm trying to say." Um, and so, you know, Dana and I have become very close throughout our whole life
Yeah.
around this gay issue.
Yeah.
You know, her friends, I was out. And so her friends knew that I was gay. Well, all they had to do was look at me because I had these short shorts on. I mean, I had a body that people would look at. I didn't really work at it. It just, I was skinny until I wasn't.
Yeah.
And then when I filled out, I was turning heads
Yeah.
if I didn't have my shirt on. And so I flaunted it. Fuck it. You kidding?
Yeah.
I'm going
Yeah.
to the park. I'm flaunting it. So I got my little short shorts on, no shirt. And, you know, Dana and her friends would always laugh. And still, even at 50 years of age, when we see each other, them,
Yeah.
50 years of it, years old, we laugh about how, you know, some people would call me Papa, others would call me whatever they would call me, but how comfortable they were as they were growing up. And then as they grew up,
Yeah.
they realized how unusual it was for somebody to be able to come out
Yeah.
at that point in
Definitely.
time and be open enough to wear those damn short shorts and no shirt and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, wow. And you already shared, I think it was during the first part, um, your parents' reaction to you coming out. And in general, I imagine probably most people, I'd imagine probably many people who came out in your generation certainly didn't have that kind of support from their parents. I mean, plenty of people still don't, but
too many people still don't, and it certainly depends on where you. I mean, all you have to do is look on the web,
yeah,
and see how many people are in pain.
yeah, absolutely.
Because they live in a small town and they can't come out.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
How
Yeah,
grateful they are to others who've helped them. I should say, Stephen, that even though I started out thinking I was the only gay person in medicine, eventually, when we came to Denver, and Jackie and I split, I was able to identify enough gay people that I started to talk to them
yeah,
to see if maybe we could have a group. And so we formed a group called Gay People in Medicine. And that was not just docs, but it was nurses, and it was paraprofessionals, and it was psychologists, and it was anybody who related to us that way and wanted to be part of the group.
yeah,
And I forget about that fact, that even though I was so ashamed in the beginning, I don't know if ashamed was the right word, but never, there must have been some shame because I never was going to be coming out.
yeah,
I came from that to actually being one of the leaders of an organization of gay people in medicine.
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's another aspect of your life that really you allowed to blossom, um, and reach potential that if you tried to ignore it or suppress it, or repress it, it would have come out eventually, I'm sure. But um, but yeah, I'm sure it would have been a lot more painful, and who knows how much pain you might have caused yourself. Um,
and so I came, the issue that one might have now, well, right now, you could be gay, married, and have kids.
yeah,
But at that point, gays weren't having kids.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and as a matter of fact, if you were gay, you might have been considered a pedophile.
yeah,
And even in France, I mean, one of the terms was a pédé. And so the thought of having kids was something that I wanted to have, but I was never going to have. But then I was married, and then I had a kid, and then I had a second kid. I guess what I'm saying is that if I had come out later, but it was before the time when it was really open and or legal,
yeah,
I might have been with somebody, but not fulfilled that part of me that wanted to be paternal.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so because of the way that I came out, it wasn't false, not in terms of coming out, but I mean in terms of getting married, it wasn't
sure,
false because
sure,
I was in love with her.
yeah,
But at the same time, there was something that I was withholding.
yeah,
Maybe a lot of us withhold stuff about ourselves until we feel more comfortable. I'm trying to think where that was going. I guess it was, it's kind of like the black thing.
yeah,
Um, if I went to college later, I might have had to choose which tables to be sitting at for lunch, whereas I went early enough that we didn't have black power as an issue, and I didn't have to choose because I don't know how I would have chosen anyhow.
yeah,
And then I did choose,
yeah,
but I didn't choose anti-white. I just chose I am black.
Yeah, sure.
And if you were to look at a picture of me in internship/residency, I was letting everybody know, as I think I mentioned to you before, that, this was Angela Davis hair
Yeah.
that I had. And still, there were two of us in the program. He was in the surgery program. I was in the medicine program. And yet, they still would call me Jim.
Yeah.
And they call him Peter. And I'm sorry, I can't get the two. Well, he was black.
Yeah.
So, and he was very good looking. So I was happy to be called Jim, but I wasn't Jim. Guys, can't you get it together?
Oh my God.
We're just two of us. One's Peter and, all right.
After you came out, were there are there any ways that come to mind where say your racial identity and sexual identity came together in complicated ways, or things like that?
Yes, I think that gays brought their own baggage with them, and part of the baggage might have been, I don't want to be with a black person. Or I've never been with a black person.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like. Are you Jewish?
No.
And black?
Oh, yeah.
Andy?
Wow.
Well, I don't have any problem with the gay part because I'm gay too, but I grew up in Iowa, and we were taught the Jews had horns. Do you know that story? I think I told you that story.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah.
Because Moses coming down.
Yeah.
With and it's in the. I mean, Michelangelo did Moses coming down from the mountain with the horns.
Yeah.
And so the people who were reading the Bible, when it was mistranslated.
Yeah,
because it was raised. It was raised, not horns. That's how it was mistranslated, just like other things were mistranslated by the Septuagint and other variations.
Into the Latin and all of that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Questions? I think you did ask me a question. Were there instances? Well, that was one.
Yeah. That's definitely what I was, the kind of.
And how did I deal with that? I felt like I had to use my body to lure people.
Yeah.
Actually. Bars wouldn't work. I was not good at bars. I could not do small talk. But if I walked around a bathhouse, people would follow me.
Yeah.
And I was not looking. It was interesting, Steven. I can't say I wasn't looking for sex, but really what I was looking for was a relationship.
Sure.
Where do you go when you're, 40 years ago or 30, that many years ago? Church? There is a church now, and there might have been a church that was forming for gays. But I wasn't a churchgoer anyhow.
Yeah.
Bars, baths. That was pretty much, or just meeting on the street. I mean, gays were over here.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I met, that I became partners with, I meant the bathhouse.
Mm.
And like Alex and I were together for 13 years,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and he died of AIDS.
Mm.
We were not together at that point, but I met him in a bathhouse. And
Yeah.
again, that's what I was looking. I was looking in all the wrong places. I don't know about that. Because I don't know what the right places would have been.
Yeah, it's not
And
like they were.
again, I could ask somebody if they wanted to dance in a bar.
Yeah.
Hi, and we small talk. Would you like to dance? No, I don't want to go home with you. I asked you if you wanted to dance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't ask you if you wanted to go home. I mean, yes, I might have been looking at you as somebody that I might want, but that's not the question I asked.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the reaction I might have had in a bar situation. And the same person in a bathhouse might be following me
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because of my body,
Yeah.
and because once you do black, you never go back. Sorry.
uh, and
uh,
in a bathhouse, you're just sitting around schwitzing when you're not walking around. So a little easier to have a conversation.
yeah, well, actually, the bathhouses were they became social places.
Mm.
The one in Denver that I would go to was 3 floors. There was a waterfall, a swimming pool. They had food. They
Wow.
had dance nights. They had a DJ. So it's a place to could have sex,
Yeah.
but you could meet somebody and or not, and just spend the night watching people or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, so that became something that for a lot of people as an outlet.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
yet, of course, that was pre-AIDS. And so, or at least it was pre-AIDS, and our AIDS might have been happening, but we might not have known it
Yeah. Sure.
because, the monkeys were doing their thing. And then there was AIDS in Africa, but it wasn't defined as that
Yeah.
until later when people looked back and had samples of blood and saw, oh, that's what they died from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Questions?
Well, yeah. So, depending on, I realize it might be a difficult period of your life to speak about, but would you like to speak about kind of experiencing um, the kind of AIDS pandemic and I mean, all of everything that came with that. I mean, I imagine you probably lost some people that were close to you, and
I don't. I don't have anybody my age who's gay. They all died.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, I mean, I would have known a number of people were they to have lived a normal lifespan and be 70 or 60, whatever, close to my age or not. But they all died.
wow,
I don't know of anybody. And there was one person that I could say that I knew who was still alive and he died. So
wow,
I mean, I'm sure I'm not, I know I'm not the only case.
sure, sure, and
But
you
at the
were,
same time, I also know that not many people survived that,
yeah, and you were
having it
working in
that
the
early.
ER during this time, so I, in your particular ER, were there a lot of cases that came through?
Yes,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
okay,
Because it was Denver General. So it was Detroit General, Denver General, Bellevue, Kings County Hospital, those hospitals where you line them up in beds.
Yeah.
And Denver General was no different at that point.
Yeah.
It's very different now, just as any city hospital is very different now. But it was similar to what we're going through now, where there wasn't anything. We were watching people die. We couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was, and I didn't know that I was one of them.
Sure.
Because when I was, I thought I could. At some point, I realized that I needed to be tested, but I didn't want to be tested until I was ready.
Yeah.
Because once I was tested, I then would have to, it would have to be reported, and I'd have to figure out what I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
And so it was 1987, I believe, that I was officially tested. And that's when I had to stop. That's when I talked to Roy, who was a friend and also was the head of the ER at St. Anthony, and said, Roy, I'm HIV positive. He didn't have a problem with that, but the problem was the ignorance.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was ignorant of how it was propagated. Can you shake hands? We just didn't know.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and as you already mentioned, that ignorance definitely persists in, certain parts of the country still. And I mean, in Texas public schools, I wasn't taught any science about any kind of sexually transmitted diseases or anything like that. So yeah, Lord knows when I actually started to realize the truth about the matters, but it was definitely far later than I should have. But yeah, but wow, I mean, yeah, that's a whole lot to experience, and especially since not only were you experiencing it, with people that you knew and loved, but also to experience it in the ER at the same time. Wow.
Let me tell you what the hardest thing for me to have done was. How do you talk to your children and tell them that you're going to die in a few years and that there's no cure?
Yeah.
And that's what I had. That's all we knew.
Yeah.
But I realized I had to, my kids were going to college at that point, and Dana had a choice of going to UVA, University of Virginia, or going to CU in Boulder. And frankly, I thought that if she chose to go away, she'd probably be coming back, because I would be either dying or dead. There was no cure. So it's just a question of holding out.
Yeah.
And the way I was thinking, I was on the forefront in terms of reading medical literature.
Sure.
But we didn't necessarily have what the medical literature was talking about until we had it.
Yeah.
They were talking about the different antiretrovirals, but we didn't necessarily have them yet.
Yeah.
They were just doing studies, and I could see. And I was trying to talk to people that I knew, like Alex and others. AZT is not the great drug. You're right. But if we could just use that until something else comes along, rather than watch our CD4 counts drop, because AIDS is really a lack of protection.
Yeah.
So you just don't have T cells enough to fight against this virus, and the virus is dropping your count enough so whatever you might have in your body might start replicating.
Yeah.
Like, the pneumonias that we might have seen. We all might have had those organisms in our bodies, but we were protected by our own immune system.
Sure.
Except when we're losing our immune system. So the hardest thing for me to do was to talk to my kids, and especially my daughter, because she really did want to go away. And I felt like she was making a mistake. And I didn't want her to pay for it in terms of guilt for the rest of her life. And the interesting thing about it was, Stephen, I was wrong. I mean, I didn't die.
Sure.
I was never hospitalized. And so it turns out that she was right, but she was right for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
She told me later as to why she had to do what she did. And that was that we were so close. Dana and I have been very, very close. And still are very close. And when she heard that I was dying, or I was going to die, what she heard was we were going to die. Or how I expressed it. And she couldn't accept it.
Yeah.
So she ran away.
Yeah.
We talk about that. I'm glad her life was turning out the way it's turning out. But at that point, I felt like she was abandoning me.
Yeah.
She didn't want to know about results. I mean, she was just blocking.
Sure.
It was too much. And it had to have been too much.
Yeah.
Think about it. I was 87, 45. I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
You're gonna die? I'm sorry. I can't hear that.
Yeah. Wow.
Actually, it might have been 40, but in any case, it struck her in particular. She's more emotive than Chris, and so it might have struck him in a similar fashion, but he was around.
Yeah.
And stayed around. And so what was the hardest thing? That was the hardest thing for me.
That was the hardest.
The dating aspect, I was with somebody, Alex, and that was off and on. I mean, Alex also wanted to experience life, and he had just come out, and so he would tell me that he wanted to explore, which made sense to me, but also it couldn't be while we were together. It just wouldn't have worked for me. But eventually he would come back and say, the person I was looking for was in front of me the whole time.
Yeah.
And it was you. And then, after the third or fourth time, I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But eventually we'd take him in until eventually we just split. He went to Hawaii. He didn't have AIDS when he went to Hawaii, but he came back from Hawaii with AIDS, full-blown AIDS. And again, we weren't together as I mentioned a number of times, but I still cared a lot for him. And so it was awful to watch this beautiful, and I mean stunning,
Yeah.
Man become so much. He was much younger than I was. He became so much older than I was, and eventually was blind.
Wow.
And I mean, it was awful to watch, and it was because that's when you have to say to yourself, am I going to go through that? I know what that is like because I've treated a number of people. I've seen it. I've seen Alex. And so the idea of taking your own life
Yeah.
was something that you might think about if you're depressed. Or in this case, you might think I was thinking about because I did not want to die that way.
Yeah, definitely.
And once you open that door, it's a very hard door to open up, let alone close, because you end up then trying to figure, well, what does that mean? You say you don't want, there were hospices around as there are right now. There were, but not as many.
Yeah.
I don't think. And so the humane treatment seemed to have been going to a hospital.
Sure.
And spending your last days there or alone. Stephen, so many people, they were isolated as people who live alone, except they have, the PPE people around them, but not their loved ones in the hospital. So I thought that I had to try to figure out how I was going to do that. I still, to this day, it's been an awful, awful thing of realizing that I have to take my own life.
Yeah.
I can't go down that path.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, in 96, when I did, quote, die, I talked to you about that, I believe. Did I?
Oh. You said that's when you were in a coma, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For a month. And they expected me to die. I think the last time we talked, I think it was you, because I'm being interviewed by my grandchild as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And getting confused as to what I said to who. But my friend, who was my doc, told his partner that weekend was Peter's going to be dying. So give me a call. You're on call. His last name was Cochran. You're on call. Just let me know when he dies, just so I know. And he didn't get the call.
Yeah.
And that's because that was the weekend that I turned around.
Yeah.
That was the weekend that I had already, it's hard to remember if I coded then and then was resuscitated from then on. I was still in coma. It could have been. That's probably what it was. But the point was that everybody thought it was the end. Anybody in the hospital thought it was the end.
Yeah.
I had necrotizing pancreatitis. Necrotizing means that my pancreas is essentially being eaten up.
Yeah.
And destroyed. And therefore, I went into the hospital in diabetic ketoacidosis.
Yeah.
I was not a diabetic before that, so I wasn't thinking in terms of, I just had some nausea and vomiting, and then more nausea and vomiting. And then eventually, Chris, luckily, was still living this house, and he went to a party, and when he came home, went to sleep, was awakened, saw me, and he said, "Dad, you got a choice. You're either going to the hospital or you're going to the hospital." And so he brought me to the hospital, and as they were wheeling me in, they were talking about a central line, putting a central line in subclavian. And I remember saying I didn't want a resident to be putting in a central line because they would be practicing, and I don't want a resident practicing on me. I want the Chuck Brannigan, the head of thoracic surgery, to be doing that. And I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
That from then on, I was gone. And you know, the rest was essentially I was dying.
Yeah.
And so, Stephen, the thing that I'm thinking about is I already did this once, and it was painless. You know, I could have just passed then, but no, they had to resuscitate me. I'm glad. Oh, but I have to die again? I have to do this one more time because it may not be as easy as the first time. This may be painful.
So it was just kind of like what, slipping off into sleep or something like that for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, after I told that resident that I didn't want him doing the subclavian, I don't remember anything after that.
Yeah.
Until
4 months later.
Yet I did have dreams.
I see.
Vivid, very vivid dreams. That were very interesting. And they put me on drug because I had liver failure, and so I couldn't metabolize.
Yeah.
So it was something that they really felt like there was no chance that I was going to survive. I had every complication that I could think of. My chart is this thick.
Yeah.
It really is seriously that thick. And when I read it, I think, as a doc, I read this chart and I realize that that person is not alive.
Yeah.
That person could not be alive. But I also am realizing that it's me and I am alive. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, one question that I always like to ask people, usually more at this point in the interview, is what are things that you want your children and grandchildren to come away from the life that you've lived so far?
I would like them to come away thinking that whoever I am, whether it's dad or papa, if it's grandchild, or whatever Jackie would call me, would not have wanted anything to have changed in this life for me.
Yeah.
Even though I suffered, when I suffered, I don't want to say there was a reason. I know there was a reason. I had disease.
Sure.
But coming out of that suffering led to something else.
Yeah.
Coming out of that coma led to me going to film school, led to me spending the next 20 years teaching that I would not have been doing.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have been practicing medicine. You know, I then became a certified teacher because I had enough certification. I had a master's degree, I had a MD, and they could certify me in those. I eventually became certified in the areas that I taught.
Yeah.
And so I had credentials. So I would want everybody to know that this kid that grew up in the Bronx with an interracial environment who didn't have a lot of money was able to soar and become more than they would ever have thought they could have been. And looking at the people in my life would not, I mean, my kids are just truly wonderful people.
Yeah.
And they are my grandkids. I'm looking at how my kids are taking care of are being parenting their kids. And I just think you guys are really amazing. You know, we got together yesterday. Yesterday was Nico's, my grandson's 11th birthday.
Wow.
And so we were able to get together. Hopefully nobody had hidden COVID, because most of us have had our second shot.
Yeah.
And it's just the little kids that haven't.
Sure.
And so hopefully they don't have any variant going on. So I'd want them to know that I lived a life, that I'm living a life.
Yeah.
But that when I pass, that I lived a life that I would not have wanted to have changed in any way, because to change in any way would not have brought me to where I am right now talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of those things that I was talking to you about in terms of the left turn and the right turn that helped me teach this, or find Jackie, or go to find Theodore Capani, or, you know, all of that. How did it happen? I don't know. But I wouldn't have wanted to have changed at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
The one thing that I would have loved to have been able to have done was to have talked to Jay. Jay was that person that I hadn't come out to, of course, because I didn't come out to anybody. But later in life, I remember speaking to him. I found him somewhere. And I told him how I felt. And it freaked him out. It freaked him out. So his last name is Wiener. And so Jay Wiener, I'm not saying that because it's funny. It's just that it's so common a name that I would never be able to find him.
Yeah,
I would not know if he'd be in New York. He could be in California. Jay Wiener is just, how do you know, what do I know about him that I could put in?
Yeah.
That he went to Hunter College?
Yeah.
So,
along with, I'm sure, many other people with the name Wiener.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, when was that you contacted him? I'm guessing a while ago.
I don't remember. Many decades ago.
Yeah.
Enough decades ago that it shocked me, because I actually hadn't had the reactions that I had were very neutral or positive.
Yeah.
There's no way that my mother would not have known. I cannot believe. When I went to dance class.
Yeah.
And it was tap dance, but it was also ball. I was doing other things as well in dance class. And then when I was up in the auditorium, I was shaking my butt. You know, I was talking to you, I think, the last time.
Yeah.
Gays know how to dance.
Yeah.
Right? And so you go to a club, and a lot of straight people would go to gay nightclubs because of the dancing and the music and the whole whatever. And it was accepted more. Well, I was up on stage in the 6th grade or whatever it was, just doing the cha-cha-cha. And I wasn't even thinking, I'm thinking now how I looked.
Yeah.
And, you know, between the fact that I was looking like that and that um, there is a story.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
You want to, yeah, I guess I should tell you the story because I must have, people must have known or suspected. And again, I might have confused them with girlfriends.
Yeah.
But I remember in junior high school that, let me make sure. Is it junior high school? Yeah. Junior high school 113. And I was in band. I was in the orchestra. And Donnie Mason was the first violinist. And he was a center basketball player. And I couldn't keep my eyes off of him.
Yeah.
Except I was trying to keep my eyes off of him.
Sure.
Well, I remember him. So our homeroom was orchestra. And I remember coming in one time and somebody said something about Peter Bryson. Now, again, this would have been ridiculous in terms of our age. But is Peter Bryson getting married or Peter Bryson? Something like that.
Yeah.
I was hearing. And I remember Donnie Mason saying something to the effect that would never happen. Somehow I understood it, that he understood me to be gay. And Steven, and I've heard this from other people, from that day on, my behavior changed.
Oh.
I wasn't John Wayne, but I talked differently. I walked differently. I honestly was trying to undo my appearance.
Yeah.
Because I was just outed by somebody, and I think, and so it might have been 10 days later or 2 weeks later that my homeroom teacher, Mr. Hannafeld, came up to me and said, "Peter, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" He said, "Because your behavior's really changed a whole lot. And I'm just concerned, are you upset about something?" No. No, what he saw was me going from my whatever I was doing to homing it in.
Yeah.
And trying to not let it show.
Yeah.
And that was a defining moment. Donnie Mason, I think, outing me to a group of people when I was thinking that nobody would know. But looking back, I could see why they could know.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely definitely a defining moment. I mean, wow. I did you interact any more with Donnie Mason after that
Oh, I
fact?
couldn't.
Yeah.
No, I was so infatuated with him to start with
Yeah.
that I couldn't even look at him.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was probably part of why he probably picked up on vibes that, you know, you know how if you're attracted to somebody, you may be giving off vibes that you don't necessarily know you're giving off.
Yeah, sure.
So I have no idea at that age if I was giving off vibes. All I know is he was down there. I was playing the trombone, and so we were up on top, and the violinists were down there, and that was our homeroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, again, one of the reasons as to why I had to be normal.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to Bronx High School of Science. I had to go to Christopher Columbus High School and just show that I could do whatever everybody else could do. And damn it, I could do it and get a 75% GPA, whatever it turned out to be, low enough that I couldn't get into you know, yeah, you did it. You did it, Peter.
And you know it, the Moshaloo Parkway story, I think, fits in well with this general thing too. You know, this you're talking to me. It's
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah. I didn't necessarily think of it as connected before, but yeah, you know, it makes sense. You want to show you're really, you know, whatever people's um,
What
stupid.
I would have liked them to have perceived.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You
Of
talking to me? Are you talking to me? Oh, yeah, I'm talking to you. You talking to me? Yeah. Oh,
I mean, it's, you know, that's another pretty miraculous story too. I feel like in its
yeah,
own
the
way.
fact that I survived. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
um, but yeah, well, wow. I mean, I think I think in many ways, uh, you know, everything has kind of come full circle in narrating your life in a way. Yeah, we've covered so much ground, and your life really just is chock full of so many fascinating stories and circumstances, and you know, this has been such a rewarding oral history. Do you have other aspects of your life that you'd like to talk about right now? Or, you know, we can also schedule another um, part of this as well. But I think we've covered everything that I had in mind anyway. But we can also just take this, you know, in further directions. Um,
Well, we have taken it in further directions in terms of we were talking about the Coops and a product of interracial marriage, and now, you know, we're talking about the 20 years of teaching in Red Rocks Community College. But in my mind, thank you, because that is part of my life.
Absolutely.
I, you know, left the Coops. This is what happened. You
Yeah.
may or may not have been talking to other people about things like that. I don't know, but for me, it's been very enlightening to be going over this, and also to know that you're going to share this with me, and therefore my family can have this,
Yeah.
because there isn't anything that I have said. I don't really have. I don't really have any secrets,
Yeah.
um, and so they pretty much know. You know, my grandkids know that I'm gay,
Yeah.
uh, and what else is there? Oh, maybe they don't know about the HIV, but that's not something that I want them to have to understand.
Sure.
You know, my 21 and 19-year-old do know,
Yeah.
but my 11 and 9-year-old don't need to
Yeah.
understand what HIV is at this point. I mean, they're trying to protect us, Jackie and I, from COVID.
Yeah.
So, and trying their best, but not necessarily doing a great job
Yeah.
because they're kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And so they want to hug you.
Yeah. And you want to be hugged by
And
them.
of course,
Yeah.
right, exactly. I mean, Nico came up to me and he hugged me, and what am I going to do? Push him away? And what I have said, and maybe we'll stop around now, because I need to eat.
Sure.
But uh, what I said was, in terms of COVID, that I don't want to be infected. If I thought I was going to be infected,
Yeah.
and I might still be,
Yeah.
but when it first started, I was the person who would be dying,
Yeah.
because I'm in the right age group with diabetes and hypertension, both of those ACE2 receptors, and that's what it affects. Be in the wrong place at the right time, and I could contract it. So I realized I didn't want to, well, the CSO, the Colorado Symphony Orchestra stopped. The DCPA Center for the Performing Arts stopped. So my friend and I had season tickets for both,
Yeah.
CSO and DCPA, and then I would go with other people doing other things. And what I said to myself was that even if I could, even if they were open, I don't want to be infected anonymously. I can't say the word. Isn't that ridiculous? I want to make sure that I'm not infected, but if I were infected, I'd want it to be because I had no choice. It was my family,
Yeah.
and I needed to be around them.
Yeah.
They needed to be around me, and if that happened, then it happened.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be anonymous.
Yeah.
And, an environment of 2,000 people, or 3,000 people in a theater, and somebody coughing, and it spreading to however many others. So, why don't we, I feel like I've covered some of the issues that we have said we wanted to cover.
Yeah.
But if I think of anything, or if you think of anything, then we can have another session.
Yeah, great. That sounds perfect. And I'm going to stop the recording now. Let me just